Sierra College has had a long history of sponsoring special events, and these are being done under the auspices of the Friends of the Library, which originated on campus 18 years ago. And since that time, tens of thousands of dollars have been donated. There have been even some people who have given their estates to the Friends of the Library. And so we always like to make a special appeal each time we have one of these events to encourage all of you who are having trouble with your children or grandchildren and would like to take care of your estate without any problems, okay, to just award the Friends of the Library of Sierra College with your estates. We've had even people in Berkeley, a professor at Berkeley who is very much loved and appreciated at Berkeley, who donated his entire collection of books to the Sierra College Library, because he really did believe in community colleges and also appreciated very much what had been done in his life when he was a student at, not Sierra College, but at a community college. Our event tonight really features a lot of railroad history. We have two men. I'd like to introduce them now. Walt Wilson, okay, and also James Mahon, both of whom have a combined history of working in the railroad system of 90 years, so that's really quite a lot. It may seem a little ironic to you to have somebody who wasn't even present during the bomb explosions, okay, to be the one who is featured, Walt Wilson. He actually was living in Los Angeles at the time and also worked for Southern Pacific at the time. But about 2 years ago, he had the opportunity of talking with somebody who had photographs of the events that took place during the bomb explosion. And as a consequence of that, his interest just absolutely spiked to the point that he collected more and more photographs, interviewed many people, and as a matter of fact, every time one of these lectures is held featuring him, there are other people who were present at the time of the bomb explosions who come to him and say, oh, I've got another story I would like to add to what you've already been informed about. So the information about the explosions on that historic day and days in Roseville, of course, continues to increase as the time goes on. Jim has had a wonderful experience too, working to railroad. His family are all railroad people, and in his family, 300 years of railroad experience. How about that? He had hoped to be able to work. He had hoped to be able to work one more year than his father. His father had worked for the railroad system for 47 years. Jim was shooting for 48 years, but when Union Pacific took over Southern Pacific, I haven't talked with you, Walt, as to whether or not you might have decided to part company with Union Pacific for the same reasons. But Jim decided that office work was not for him, and so he told Union Pacific, I'm handing in my resignation, and he quit only after 46 years. Not bad, okay. Anyway, we are very happy to have both of them here, and there will be an opportunity for all of you to ask questions at the end of the presentation. Walt is going to show slides that he has about it. And also, if there are questions that you'd like to ask somebody who was actually present, helping try to take care of the bombs, trying to take care of the railroad cars, etc., Jim Mahon is our man for that tonight. Thank you all for coming.
Okay, I'm up first.
And like he said, 2 years ago, Dan Sanford gave me a collection of photographs, and this book, which is only 4 of them, and Jim has one also. And so I started putting things together, and I started talking to people I worked with, and found out more and more. And then another fellow railroader gave me the FRA report, which gives all the details that you could ask for, including the court case. So it starts with the shells being produced in Oklahoma, and they're shipped out to Hawthorne, Nevada by truck. Of course, they're not loaded at that time. They're loaded in Hawthorne, and it's called Tritonol. It's 80% TNT and 20% aluminum shavings. And so these bombs, after they're made, They had about 7,050 bombs, and they're loaded into 21 cars. Now, these cars are inspected by 2 inspectors, both before the loading of the cars and after the loading of the cars. So remember that. 2 inspectors inspecting twice. One's an SP inspector and one's a government inspector or Department of Defense inspector. So after they're inspected, they're put aside, and they call the SP, and they send a local engine out of Sparks. It's 138 miles down to Hawthorne. And they go down and they pick these cars up and they take them back to Sparks. And they sit there in Sparks for 2 days on a track that they know that they're going to entrain the cars in a train, and I'll use railroad lingo, the first OGRV M27. It took off from Ogden about 10 o'clock in the morning of the 27th. It arrived in Sparks around 10 o'clock. The yard crew, the road crew gets off. The yard crew grabs the engine and a number of cars, and they pick up these 21 cars and entrain them, and they bury the cars so they're not close to the engine, according to FRA or railroad rules. And the road crew going from Sparks to Roseville gets on, and the train leaves approximately about 11 o'clock. Now, the engineer, I worked with him for 25 years, never knew that he was the engineer on this train. And so when I go to call him up 2 years ago, he died the year before. So I didn't get to talk to him, but I talked to a number of other people. But anyway, the train departs Sparks, and they have a few problems at the top of the mountain. They come apart 3 times before they find out that there's a uncoupling lever that's bad. And so they fix it, they get the train back together, and off they go to Roseville. Now, railroading, still, they put the brakes on at the top of the mountain, and they take the brakes off at Loomis. They control their speed with the dynamic braking. So you're going to get sparks all the way down the mountain. You have the way the track goes, it comes down, it's flat, goes down, flat, goes down, flat, and then there's Yuba Gap, it's flat, Gold Run, it's flat, behind the high school, I think it's flat a little in Auburn. Yeah, oh, it's flat in Colfax too. So anyway, instead of putting the dynamic brakes on, then they put the power, put the train in power and pull it through with the brakes on. Well, as they're going down the hill, they pass Alta, and there's a guy in there that's from Colfax named Dave McLean, and he's camping out. And he's sort of a train nut, so he's recording sound-wise the train going by. And he's watching the train too. Doesn't notice anything unusual. You know, there's sparks off of almost every train, and he sees a few sparks here and there, and one of the cars is the bomb car. And he goes back to sleep. Train keeps going. It gets down to Rockland. There's a couple people in a car there at one of the Rockland road crossings, watches the train go by. The train goes by, they take off and go into Roseville, and they're going right beside the train. They see it again. By the way, they're interrogated later about this, and didn't see anything. When they get to Roseville, there's what's called a herder at the east end, and he calls the yardmaster asking where he's going to go, and the yardmaster tells him. And now I'm going to have to get the map out. So I get my 2 helpers here. Okay, wait a minute. Let's see. Oh, San Francisco. Okay, go ahead.
What time did they get to Roseville?
Okay, they got to Roseville, I'm saying approximately 6 o'clock, 6 in the morning. Okay, now this is an SP yard. It's completely different now. It's a UP yard. It was redone in 1996. And this is the old SP yard. So you have a receiving yard here, 1 through 22. Actually, the 22 is a cleaning track. So all the trains, now you have to realize, in actuality, this would be 5 times longer. because it's about 4 miles from one end to the other end. So this is a receiving yard, this is a classification yard, and this is a departure yard. They bring trains in here on the receiving yard. They're inspected, they're humped over the hump, they're classified into blocks, and the blocks are put together and pulled into here to make up a train. And so you have going west to San Francisco and down to the valley, and you have going north and east. So the train arrives here approximately 6 o'clock. The herder lines him up, and you have a running track going from one end of the yard to the other end of the yard. So this is westward running track. The one at the bottom is the eastward running track. Okay, so he's going to line the train down this number 9 out to the hump. The hump yard master is going to have this herder line him into number 7 all the way to the end. Now, he has about 103 cars. It's not going to fit in this track, even though it's one of the longer tracks. So they have to make a cut and put the excess cars in another track. And the yard master says, well, 3 will fit. So where they make the cut is 3 cars behind the explosives. So the 3 cars end up on the east end of number 3, and the explosives are on the west end of number 7. Got that? Okay, so you can roll that up, Mark. So this is you can dim the lights just a little. This is a shot of the Roseville Yard in 1973, by the way. So, and my map, I didn't have the engine service facilities, but you can see that there's an engine house that's white right in the middle there. And the running track is over about an inch or 2. And so you can see that the receiving yard is way out there. And so Roseville is not really built up at this time, where they have a lot of homes out in the Antelope area. The dividing line for the counties cuts right across the receiving yard. Now, the town of Antelope has about 100 people. It doesn't have very many people. So now I got to change over to my slide presentation. Let's see if I can do this without. Yeah, just leave it like that. Escape. Oh, shoot. What's that say up there? Mark, can you see where I can escape? Down at the bottom? Exit. Okay, good. I'm used to looking at it. Focus that up a little bit. There it is, right there. Okay, so now I want to go next to that. No, I don't want that. Wrong one. So you hit the X. Yeah, I'm going to just make it small. Okay, now where am I here? Do you see the, okay. You want PowerPoint? Yeah. It's on the left. All right, now I got these photographs from Herb Joyner, Dan Sanford, Rich Johnson, and Gary Nelson. There's a few others thrown in, and I'll talk about them when I get there. So the cars look like this. There's Department of Defense freight cars or box cars, and the end is modified. This is the only car I could get a shot of that looks essentially as a 50-foot box car. And of course there was 21 of them. Now, the 3 that are on the east end of number 3 went back to Hawthorne, Nevada. In fact, they went back the same day. They had all kinds of dents on the roof, but Tim Smith was the brakeman on that. Yeah. Okay, this is similar to the power that brought the train in. It's not exactly the same power. The head unit on the train that came in was the 9117. I couldn't get a picture of that. Okay, now the bombs are about this high. with the detonators and the fins, they would be about 6'5", something like that. They shipped the bombs without the detonators. The only way the bombs go off is a high temperature, about 1,000 degrees, or with detonators. Important. Be a test at the end. Okay, this is one of the bombs at the archives there, right near the Crooked Bridge, Rainbow Bridge. They saved that. You can see the threads. And there's a front shot like that, and there's a side, no side shot. Okay, now the photographer for the B was out there. I just found out in my last talk what happened to the photographer. He was going east on I-80, going to Roseville to interview some women's group for some kind of function. And he thought that with the bombs going off, that might be more important. So he gets to the field and he takes this picture. And 2 seconds later, he's knocked back on his back about 10 feet from the explosion. Here's another shot of his. Now you notice that the cars there, what we call track 22, are about 50 foot. If you put them on their end, that's about 300, 350, maybe even 400 feet high. Notice the shrapnel, little bits of steel. Of all the things that the guys that were working close to there said, they didn't worry about the explosion itself. What they worried about what was coming down on them. Oh, that first picture of the explosion showed some lumber, and I have the Herb Joyner. As soon as he heard this, the first explosion, he called his partner out, and they went out to the airport, and they took off, and he went flying over this, and you'll see some air shots in a second. And he's a photographer and a pilot, and he took a whole bunch of shots between he got up in the air about 8:30, got over the what we're talking about, where the explosions were, about 5 to 9. He took pictures for about 10 or 15, maybe 20 minutes, went back to the airport, went home, developed a film, took the film down to, now they were evacuating Roseville at the time. You cannot be on the streets. So he took the back roads down to the yard office to show his boss. And because they're wondering what was happening, it'll show in a few minutes how extensive it was. Now this is Rich Johnson's shots from, he works in the roundhouse, and he went out on the north side and took some pictures of the bombs going off. Okay, now this is another photographer. Now this is South Roseville, and he's about 3 miles away. And there's the start of the explosion, a next shot, the next shot, and the next shot. And he also worried about the shrapnel coming down. Okay, now this is Herb Joyner in his airplane. You notice I got it just the opposite. Oh, I got it right, February 1976. For a long time it was just the opposite. Now here's this, I think this is his first shot, and I think it's around 3,000 feet. Okay, on the left-hand side is the main line going east. On the right-hand side is Roseville Road, and right next to it are 3 tracks, rock pile 23, 24, and 25. And then you see in the middle where a lot of the smoke is close to track number 7. If you count over, you can count over from 22, or it's hard to count over from 1 to 7 because of the smoke. No lumber yet. I figured the lumber that explosion was between 9 and 12 o'clock. He went up 3 times, once at 9 o'clock, once at 12 o'clock, and once at 3 o'clock. And he's circling around. Now, you notice that there's a lot of fires away from the yard, and that's the shrapnel, the heated shrapnel coming down and starting grass fires. So over on the left-hand side, you can see some grass fires. Yeah, later on, you'll see there's a couple homes that were on fire.
Is the plane in any danger up there? Was he in any danger?
Only 6 holes went through his wing, and he poo-pooed the idea that it was dangerous, but. And that's the wing strut. The first plane they went up at 9 o'clock was a 172, and that's all aluminum. The second and third time is in his own little Champion, which is fabric, and that's where the holes were. Okay, now they're right near the Antelope. There's a post office and a store there, and there's about 3 or 4 homes really close. Really close, and I'll show you a few shots of one shot before on the Grange, and one shot after on the Grange, and then the after shots on the homes. Again, he's flying. You can see the homes are far enough away, but a lot of windows from that close up to all the way for 2, 3, 4, 5 miles, maybe even 10 miles, you get some windows going out. One guy down in the southeast part of here claimed that the explosion pushed his house off the foundation. And I think the SP paid for the new foundation. Okay, here's some color shots. I think this is the next day, because it looks like most of the explosions are done with, but I can't. And so here's, the Grange and those homes, and over on the right side there at the bottom. And here's another shot. Wasn't this place down here, wasn't it a scrap dealer?
Yeah.
And he's got a few fires going in his yard. Okay, now he's up in his airplane about 12 noon, and you can see the lumber, which is about 200 yards to 400 yards spread out. And I don't know if they're 2x4s or 2x what, but there's a little, yeah. And the wind is blowing northeast, so a lot of the fields on the north side were catching fire. There's another little closer shot of the same shot. Again, it shows a little more. We're not down far enough to the post office, but I got a shot of that.
What would those tank cars have in them?
Those 3 tank cars had tomato paste. You'll see the tomato paste on the ground a little later. Again, that's a flat car load of lumber. Okay, now here's a couple days later, and maybe Jim could tell me what the date is. Now I'm having a hard time. This is the main line right here. The tank cars are on the main line. They're water cars to put up the fires, and I'm thinking that 7 is right through here. I'm not positive because I can't count over from 1.
That was approximately where it was, where track 7?
Yeah.
Where they blew up right there?
Yeah, because there's a whole bunch of craters, about 125 by 35 by 25 foot deep, maybe even a little deeper, maybe even 30.
Some of them were 18, 20 feet deep and probably 80 feet long.
Well, the data I read, there was 5 big craters.
Yeah, there were big craters in there.
Yeah.
The one crater that I seen after everything cleared out, they allowed us to go in there. You could have put one of those big locomotives in the hole and buried it.
Yeah.
Jim, Walter, there are 3 craters. They're propane cars that blew. 3 craters.
Okay, here's another shot. Now you notice that there's no cars down here, and there was in the previous pictures, there was cars. Now they got together in the yard office and decided that they had to move some of those cars, had to move all those cars as close as they could to the bomb cars as possible. So they asked for some volunteers. And some volunteers were told they had to go down there. And there's one volunteer, one manager that went down there, and he was cutting away the cars. And you want me to tell it, or you want to tell it?
Whatever.
Okay, I'll tell it. Anyway, Jim was there uncoupling cars for them to pull down. And he noticed that as soon as he coupled this one track, that he heard an explosion behind him. He said, oh no. So he ducked under the car that was moving. It was moving slow enough for him to get underneath it. And just where he was standing, a boxcar door came down and slid underneath the car and derailed the car. And the rail rolled over. And he said to the engineer said, are you okay? And he said, yeah, but stop. So he uncoupled that car, and the rest of the cars were pulled down. So that's just one incident where they were right there next to where the explosions were going off. So they pulled all these cars down. It took them about 4 hours, maybe.
Well, we did that in less time than that. Probably, I'd say about an hour and a half, we had all those cars separated. And
Yeah.
The idea of separating those cars was to keep the cars in burning, and everything that was burning, the lumber and everything that was in those cars. And they were dumping water on it, and they just couldn't put them all out, so they send us, it was about 15 or 16 of us that went down there to pull the pins on these different trains and different tracks so we could put those fires out. And it got pretty hairy down in there, I can tell you that. When that bomb went off where I was at, and then the guy next to me, we were pretty shook up and when we got in there. And I tell you, it wasn't no fun. Especially as Walt was talking about the shrapnel coming down. Well, while I was under this car, the shrapnel was coming down in between these other cars on the track. And finally I got nerve enough to come out from underneath, you know. It was, most of that stuff had already dissipated and hit the ground.
Yeah, I'm going to distribute some shrapnel.
But,
Okay, I have some shrapnel for those who I'll let you pass that on.
I just want to let you know that you've got a member of that crew here, West Burgess Kinsler.
I know, I owe Wes a lot of gratitude. There's one piece of shrapnel that shows the threads for the top of the bomb. I'll let you look at it and pass it back. Okay, more. Oh shoot.
Jim, Walter, can I add on to this? Can I add something else? We actually, SP Fire Truck going in, with the SP Fire Department, we came in, going into the bomb blast area, the civilians were coming out with windshields busted, their cars all decked out there, so we went in for the south side of Roseville Road, came around the crossing there, and get about, I'd say about 500 feet from the ammo store. That's where we parked our fire truck there. There, the shrapnel started falling near our fire truck, so we had to back out though. That's how bad that shrapnel was coming off.
Well, I got to go back to when the first bomb went off, because I left out something. There was an employee there, Carmen, that was inspecting a train on the running track. It was a train to go out. And at 7:30 in the morning, he noticed that there was some smoke coming from the west end. And so he radioed to his supervisor saying, hey, I see some smoke on the west end of Antelope Yard. I'm going to go up and get a better look at it. Well, about that time that he did that, the supervisor came out, got in his car, and went out to the west end. Well, the Carmen climbed a ladder to get a better look, and about 8:04, the first bomb went off. Blew him off the car. The supervisor got to the west end of the yard, and at the same time the bomb came up, all that shrapnel hit that car. Those are the first two casualties. They weren't hurt badly, but they were hurt. The casualties were about 50 people injured. The most serious was a little girl got her eye put out with flying glass. So let me keep going here. You can see that the cars, you can't tell too much about the cars anymore. There's mostly scrap steel.
Walt, can I add on to that? Go back to the tank cars.
I can't go back.
Okay, I saw three tank cars, right?
They're right there.
Yeah, they're right there.
In the upper left.
No, they're right here. Those are water cars to put the.
On the water truck, on the fire truck, we put that fire truck on a piggyback. We hooked up three tank cars to the fire truck, we wrapped it with the.
I got that picture in the. I got that picture at the end.
So our idea was get those three tank cars in series, wrap those cars to the truck, the fire truck. Okay, Walt.
Okay. All right, so,
He's talked. The tank cars are with tomato paste are right here. And of course, this is 7 right in here, I think. And here's the water cars that were used to put out the fires. So I got a couple. Here's one of the craters. By the way, the engineer on the other end of your cuts that were being pulled out was that guy that back there, Wes Berg.
Guy by the name of,
Wes.
was with me, his name is dead now. His name was Frank Vanderpool. And this guy was, he really wasn't an engineer. He was just a maintenance away guy. And he used to be the roadmaster up at Copac. He learned to run an engine from the work train
Yeah.
and everything.
Well, one of the tracks you pulled out, he was at the other end.
Yeah, he was probably at the other end, yeah.
Yeah.
The engineer working with me was Frank Vanderpool.
Yeah. All right, well, let's keep going. And Wes, that's you right there. There's Herb Joyner, and that's J. Frank Young. That's you on the left. Well, Dan Sanford and Herb Joyner, the following day, when everything cleared up, asked the management if they could go out and look around. 2 of them are photographers. So this is the collection I'm showing now when they went out and around.
Are those pipes?
This is rail.
Oh, that's right.
That's rail.
Okay.
Okay, more debris. Most of these cars are cut up and just scrap steel, basically. And you can see that was a boxcar. All these cars were cut up later.
I believe Smith's or Steel got rich of that.
Okay, I think that's a bomb.
It is.
And if you look, you might see a few more.
One down in the level.
Yeah, right there. Okay. I got another shot showing more. So out of the 7,000 bombs, they retrieved about 1,400 and took them back to Hawthorne, Nevada. Some got buried. Okay, they're on top of some cars looking out. Here's your UP caboose that somebody was asking about. There's the tank, one of the tank cars.
I think that probably rubbed the UV a little bit sore, that's why they bought it out.
They wanted their caboose back.
They wanted it back.
Another caboose. Yes, and he'll talk about that later. Okay, some more cars turned over. And there's your tomato paste right in there.
Now, these twisted rails are all heavy duty.
Yes.
Well, most of that was all a 90-pound rail in the yards, 90 and some 110.
Okay, another caboose. There's Dan Sanford standing close to where the first bomb went off, and you can tell that that is really scrap steel there. Another crater.
Those are those flat cars you were talking about with the lumber?
Yeah. I have one shot that I haven't put in here showing a flat car burning loaded lumber. Okay, that's the post office and the Antelope store, and it never reopened. And I was about 2 talks ago. There was a woman in the audience, and her mother was a postal clerk there, and they lived 2 blocks on the other side of the store, and she lost her home and her job on the same day. Later on, she got a job at the Roseville post office. But she didn't get her house back.
Where were the bombs supposed to be going? They weren't supposed to end up in Roseville.
They were supposed to end up in Vietnam,
Oh, they were on their
They
way
actually were shipping them down to,
San Francisco?
not,
the Bay Area, Chicago, Port Chicago, and then loaded it.
Chicago.
Okay, now, according to Jim, that when he looked over towards the Antelope area, all he could see were these trees with no leaves on them, whereas, you know, the day before there's...
I looked at those trees, I've had charge of the Roseville yard. And of course, I seen those trees many times, they were all leaved out, you know, pretty nice. But the next time I seen them, they looked like a picked chicken, there was nothing on them. And I kept looking, I said, wow, it just stripped them leaves, some of the branches, everything off those trees.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe.
Okay, now-
It was quite a distance from it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the homes. And it's just a pile of lumber now. Now, this is the Grange Hall before. And it's a picture taken from a newspaper. And there's the Grange Hall after. Can you tell it was a Grange Hall? That's looking from the Grange Hall back to the yard with all the smoke from all the fires. And, you know, a lot of these fires were caused just because the heat got up so high. Yeah, I don't want to talk about the cause of the explosion yet. Here's another home. I think that's the Bobbitt home. Scrap. That's looking towards the, what does it say at the bottom? Another home. And this is the hookup to re-rail some cars or just put them on, put all the scrap in either a gun or, actually I guess they are riding.
Taking some of those cars, they were going over and whatnot and just lifting them out of the way.
Oh, okay.
with a hook.
Okay, shows a few bombs. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. About 12 bombs there, maybe. Okay, now here's one of the houses that caught fire. Now, most of the people were gone, so they couldn't respond right away, like if someone was home, either at that home or next door. Almost the whole town of Roseville was evacuated. And you had the CHP there, you had the Placer County Sheriff, you had the the Sacramento County Sheriff. National Guard was there too. So they had quite a few people, and it was hard to get in and out. Okay, now this is the lady that worked at the post office. This was her home before, and you can't tell too much afterwards, except most of the windows are broken out. But there were holes in the roof and in the walls from the shrapnel falling down. And here's one hole, or I should say, this is the inside of a ceiling, lath and plaster. And here's a hole, I think that's through the wall. And that's a big piece of shrapnel. Oh, that's the end. Okay, so now I have to, I got one more thing to show before we talk afterwards. Okay. Where's the arrow saying go? Right there? Okay, I should make it larger. This is KCRA, and it's about 1.5 minutes. There's the same shot again. Okay, it's almost over with. Okay, now. Okay, one more thing to show, and then we can have questions and answers. Okay, I was giving this talk to the Colfax Historical Society, and this guy came along with a picture like this, and it was damaged, and he wanted to know if he could have a copy of it. Now, what had happened is the SP called this survey company, and it's out there at the airport, Executive Airport, and they started in the Bay Area and started taking pictures, 9 by 9, all the way to the foothills. And you know, you could pick your roll and everything. So I called them, and they said, yeah, we have these rolls. So here's the lumber, by the way, from that explosion, another lumber. And the explosion is right there. So I called them up, and I went down there to get a copy. And they had 2 rolls that they were going to show me. And you can see, as they're getting the rolls by, where the explosion was. And every one that they showed me, it wasn't one of these. It didn't have the explosion in. And so we... he said, well, I got another roll, but it's restricted. He says, the other 2 rolls you could have bought for $125 each. I said, oh no. So, but the restricted roll, they said, you can see it, but you can't get anything unless you get permission from the SP, or as now owned by the UP. So we looked, and sure enough, he found it right away. And so I said, well, I know how to get permission. So I went out to the legal department and asked them. I had the old copy of this guy that had his, and I showed him. I said, I'm just going to use it in these talks. He said that shouldn't be any problem. He wrote a letter to me and the survey company saying I could have one. So I went back to them. They said, yeah, we can give you one. So I went back 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, 10 weeks later. Yeah, we're going to get it to you. 6 months, and they mailed it to me, no charge. So it pays to know the UP, I guess. I thought this was kind of an interesting, if someone wants to look at it at the end. Okay, so now I got to talk about the cause. Now, Dave McLean, when he started hearing the bombs, just like a lot of the people who lived here in the Sacramento area, was curious on what was going on. And he called his dad, and he said, well, turn on the radio. The bombs are going off in Roseville. He says, I think I saw that train. So he calls up the sheriff's department, and they said, well, bring your recording in. We'd like to hear it. So they brought it. Him and his dad brought it in, and they listened to it, and it sounded like that was the train. And so he went home, and they said, well, we'll call you. Left his name and address. Well, they lost his name and address, and they didn't get a hold of him for another 7 days. By that time, he's going back to San Luis Obispo to school down at Cal Poly. And then the NBC, ABC, CBS found out that he was at Cal Poly, and he was one of the witnesses. So a whole bunch of barrage of reporters showed up at his apartment, and all his friends saying, what's going on, Dave? Oh, nothing. So anyway, the sheriff's department hands it over to the SP, and they said, well, it's just another railroad nut. We're not going to pay any attention to it. But then they started listening to it. Their law department said to the operating department, you need to listen to this. The axle count was exactly what it was supposed to be. The engines going by was exactly where they're supposed to be. The number of engine units were just exactly what it was. There's helper units cut in about 2/3 of the way back. So all the axle counts were just right. So yes, they did have a good witness. Well, him and Herb Joyner, who also took the pictures, became witnesses. I don't know if it was for the SP or the Department of Defense. I think it was for the Department of Defense. There were two theories for the cause of the bombs going off. Remember I told you the heat, 1,000 degrees? Now, there's a plate above each wheel so the sparks don't hit the floorboards, the oak decking. They think one of the plates fell off. This is the Department of Defense theory. One of the plates fell off. The sparks ignited the boards. It smoldered for a number of hours until 8:04. The temperature got up high enough and the bombs went off. And they took those three cars that were on the east end of number 3, and they took them back to Hawthorne and they ran tests. They ran tests to see if the temperature would go up, and it did. Everything they did, all the tests confirmed that that was the problem. But you still have the inspections where they didn't find anything wrong. So there's something wrong with that. The SP's contention was that they had a faulty bomb and it went off. And it started the whole explosion in a chain reaction. Now the explosion started at 8:04. It tapered off during the afternoon, but the last two bombs to go off was 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. Yes?
The bomb went off at 7:52.
Well, it depends on who you read.
We left the firehouse at 7:58. We're down by the machine shop there. First blast went off at 7:58.
Yeah. Well, in the papers it said 7:56, 8:04, 8 o'clock. It depends on who you're talking to and what clocks. You're probably close to it. Anyway, they went to court, and anybody have any idea how much the deductible is for the insurance for the Southern Pacific Railroad? You can't answer. Huh? No, $4 million. So they had a lot of problems cleaning up because of all the debris and the tires. And I think, so they went to court, and because the evidence was all in shreds, they couldn't determine what the cause was. So they decided they would each would pay a part. Now there was 3 litigants, the SP, the Department of Defense, and the detector manufacturer, because 2 of the detectors were not working. Detectors find out if there's something wrong with the train going by, and the last 2 were not working. And so the SP says, well, you're involved in this too, so you have to come to court too. And they did. So I think they split the costs. I'm not sure. But I'm going to...
I never did find out who did.
Yeah.
As far as the cost. It's kept pretty...
Yeah, well, the SP paid out a lot of money before anything else, before the Department of Defense. And I think what they did is they settled up after the court case on how much was owed.
So the money that was paying out at first was mainly the property owners.
Right.
Right around people's houses, windows.
Right, windows, a lot. The glass companies made a lot of money.
Oh, they had their insurance people out there with their checkbook, and they were just writing them left and right.
Yeah. So, you want to talk about the cleanup?
Sure, I'll talk about it. Oh, you're in this mic.
Okay, go ahead.
Got a question where you clean up. There was an engineer on a freight westbound out in Antelope, and he left the yard without authorization, pulled his freight down to Elvis. Is it true that SP gave him some grief for doing that?
Yeah.
The engineer that took his freight without a crew, he was in the west end of the yard there. And when the first explosion went off, he just throttled up and left Dodge. He drove it all the way.
Well, I kind of doubt that.
I didn't hear any of that.
Yeah.
I was the herder at Antelope that night, and I was there right, and nobody left without authorization.
So he did have authorization?
He did.
Oh.
If he left the yard, he had authorization.
Oh.
Okay, I'm going to turn the rest over. Any more questions? Yeah.
I just would like those that were there, if we could maybe have them stand. 'Cause
Okay.
it sounds like there's quite a few.
Tim, are you there? You were there.
Just all those that were there, if you guys would stand, that's pretty neat to see.
Where were you? the afternoon, okay. What about you? What afternoon shift?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock? Oh, so he already went by you.
Yeah, he was by me.
Okay. Well, I don't know about the cutting off, the doubling over and the cutting off the helper. I'm not sure. I don't have any information on that. I'm having trouble finding people who could tell me about that.
You know,
Yeah.
On the power left the area there, the power went off, was about 15 or 14 cars. They went to Elvis. And the guy at Elvis says, where's your crane at? Is this plane blowing up there? That's what I said.
I kind of doubt that story. I kind of doubt that story. He can't leave his train.
He took the crane, about part of the crane. Oh, right there, the animals.
you know,
He was there and he never highballed anybody without the whole train being going. So I kind of doubt that story. Any other questions before Jim finishes up on the cleanup? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I did see that. I was in the 3rd Engine Company in Citrus Heights Fire District at that time. I was standing in front of the Antelope store. There was a two knuckles laying in the street there with the adjacent springs on both sides. The whole thing was about 10, 15 feet long. And it didn't have any skid marks. It had just come straight down right to the side of the store, between the store and the school, I mean the house. And as I was walking back to the truck, the train left. It was a small switch
That
engine.
might be after you left.
could have been after.
Yeah, it was a small switch engine, and it was huffing and puffing for all that little locomotive had, and barely moving.
Yeah, but he'd have to run through the
There
switches.
was a switchman of some kind hanging on to the very last car on the rails, onto the handle,
Hmm.
on the very last car as he left.
Okay, next question.
Was there a congressional report that?
Yes, FRA report. It belongs to Wes.
Oh,
You know I'm gonna get it back.
Soon.
Last one I got.
Next.
public copy of that? Can we obtain that?
FRA put out an investigation. They investigated the whole thing. All the details that I was telling you is in that investigation.
I get that number in.
That's what the conclusion was at the end. At the end, no. They couldn't determine it because the evidence was all blown up. It's just shrapnel. Yes.
What was the destination of the bombs before Vietnam?
Port Chicago, and then loaded onto a freighter going to Vietnam. Now, I gave this talk to the Auburn Aviation Association, and we had about 4 or 5 pilots, Vietnam pilots, and he says, yeah, I remember dropping those kind of bombs. Mark 81 bombs is what they're called. Yeah, they're 250-pound bombs, and they looked at the explosion and said, yeah, that's just like what it looks like. Yeah.
Wasn't the liability for the 3 parties, it had to be a lot more than 4 million?
Oh, yes, it was quite a bit more. But that was the deductible.
Yeah, the insurance.
Yeah.
The rest, but I wonder what the total sum was, probably quite a lot.
Yeah.
8 million?
It's more than that. Something like 40 million.
That was real money then.
Yeah. I'm going to let Jim finish on the cleanup.
You got me all wired up here. Anyway, I'm going to start from the time that I was called on a Saturday morning, which was on April on the 28th. I'd been a brand new promoted individual that I was a roadmaster at Truckee, and then came down to Colfax, and then they just promoted me up to assistant division engineer. And when I got the call to come on down to Roseville, they had a problem. They had bombs blowing up, and I thought, oh boy. But I did feel that I lived at Colfax off a place called Placer Hill Road, up on a hill there, and I felt those windows in my house shake you know, and I didn't think too much of it. I thought, oh, well, we just had a little bit of an earthquake here, and that's it, you know, and I kind of sloughed it off. About 35, 40 minutes later, that phone rang, and so you get down here to Roseville right away. So anyway, I went to Roseville, and we met up with several other officers down there. We had our superintendent and our division engineers, just several people. And at that time, as we gathered into the office, they were telling us, you know, we don't want anybody down in that area where the bombs went off. So we very well understood that. So we just all kind of sit down like flies on the wall, you know, and waiting for them to tell us what we're going to do. Little did we know anything of what we was going to do, because we was probably about half scared to death, you know, all of us, when we seen the smoke and everything going up. So that particular day, they started flying in some of the officers, like our president, who's Biagini, and Dick Spence, general managers, and other folks at high ranking from San Francisco into Sacramento to come up there and look over the situation. So we sit there all day waiting for them to tell us what we were going to do. Well, the day went by, and nobody got down in that yard. They stayed away from them cars, because every now and then one of those bombs would go off. So nobody wanted to go down there. I'll tell you, we were half scared to death. And so the day got by, and they were all in the office deciding what they were going to do. And Sunday morning come along, and when I got down there Sunday morning, I went down at 6 o'clock in the morning. They had already had your fire cars, I believe it was, and all they had fire trucks there, and those fire cars all held 12,000 gallons of water apiece, and I think there was something like 6 of them hooked together, 3 of them, and I think they took those 3 out and bought in 3 more later. But they were really drowning that place, and they didn't seem to be getting too far ahead of that fire. I mean, they'd put one out, and there'd be another one over here or something, and it was pretty touch and go for them out there, you know, around those bombs and whatnot. So anyhow, finally, in that afternoon, well, they got a hold of the ordnance people, which was the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force, to come out and allow us to go in and see what we were going to do. Now, nobody wanted to go in there at that time. We thought, let them guys go in there. They know what it's all about. We'll just sit here and wait until they come back out, and then we'll go in when they tell us we can. So anyhow, they went in there, and they were looking over, or they'd been in there 2-3 hours with some of our high-ranking officials, especially the president and them. And they came back out and decided that the next morning, which was be Monday morning, we were gonna go in there again, and if everything was, the bombs quit going off and the fires were out, we'd go in there and start making some cleanup work. Well, that Sunday morning, we started to go out there and look things over, and of course they had another bomb blow off, so that stopped everything right there. And we just kind of sat around for a while, and finally they went back in there again, and they made the decision that those bombs they did not have the detonators in them. They were all 250 pound, and I think there was some even smaller bombs in there, because when I went in there with some people, we went in there, we called in some contractors. Jim Dobus was one from Newcastle. Another guy by the name of Gabe Mendez was another one from Newcastle. Him and Jobus are side by side. And we had another guy in there by the name of Cliff Edwards. And they were in the huddle telling us, you know, all the equipment that they had, because we wanted to know what they had to bring to the party. So anyhow, we ended up getting them all down there, and Dobus, I think he'd come in there with about 2 loaders and a cat or 2 and whatnot, and so did Gabe Mendez and Edwards. Well, that was all well and fine, so we was going to pick up all these bombs and load them in the buckets of these loaders. And then we'd put them in end dumps so they could take them out, and they were going to take them out to Lahontan, where they took all those bombs out. So anyhow, we got out there, and later on in the afternoon, we were loading all these bombs. This bunch of us. By this time, they called in more people, and we'd throw them in the buckets. But come to find out, we noticed our loaders kept slowing down. They weren't coming in as quickly as they could, so we get these bombs all loaded out, and there was a lot of bombs out there. So we asked Dobus, what's going on? Where's your loaders? And he says, well, he said, I got a flat tire man called here in Roseville, and he's up there fixing flat tires on them loaders. Well, what happened, all those pieces of fragment that you were talking about, and of course the spikes and all that debris that was out in there was flattening the tires on these loaders. So they thought, well, we're just going to have to do something else. But I think they bought in another tire man. Now, that didn't solve the problem. We still had more tires that was going flat. So they bought in a couple track loaders then, and on the tracks, and then we were able to load a lot of those bombs out and get them gone and clean that place up. But from that day on, then we all got in a huddle on Monday night, Tuesday morning, and we were discussing the plans that we were going to go forth with, putting this thing back together, cleaning up the debris. And most of that stuff, as Walt indicated to you and showed you pictures, it was all cut up and shoved off to the side with bulldozers, whatever we can, just to clear areas out so we could build the tracks back. Well, me and my brother, Richard, he was also one of the people that was out of San Francisco. And he came over there on Monday morning, and he always called me Yogi Bear. I got a name of the bear, and he'd come up to me and he says, Yogi, what's going on? And I said, you know as much as I do. Go talk to the big boys, So anyhow, he did, and we both did. They got us all in a huddle, and they decided that we were going to start in after the cleanup, laying track and getting those tracks back in. And they gave him and I 12-hour shifts. We went from 12 midnight to 12 the next day, and we had our own crews. Now, they bought in crews from different locations. We bought them from Bakersfield. We bought crews in from Oakland. We bought crews in from the old NWP Railroad over on the coast. We had crews from Nevada, out of Reno, Nevada. We had crews from all top of the hill. We had some that even came from Dunsmuir down. We had a little over 300 and some odd men that came in. And of course, we had to house them all there in hotels and motels right there in Roseville, and they set up restaurants to feed these people and whatnot. But I'll tell you, that was really something to be there with those crews. But I guess I should back up and tell you, when the morning that they had all these fires going, they were going to put them out, they decided we'd go in there and pull the pins on those cars, all the tracks that was loaded with trains and lumber and everything. They wanted to get them separated from that fire. So they sent, I think it was 15 of us in there. And I was sitting over against the wall, kind of thought I was kind of hit out over there, And they said, well, we're going to send some of you guys in there. And then they came down there and they said, you. And I kind of ducked behind the other guy, but it didn't work. So anyhow, I was one of the chosen ones to go out there. And the guy that I worked with as an engineer was Frank Vanderpool, which is now deceased. He was a maintenance away man. And that's when we went out there, and we all went at one time to go in there to pull those pins at one time so these engines could start pulling those cars back at the same time. And just as I was pulled a pin, one of those bombs, a couple of cars went from me, went off. And the only thing I could think of was to get out of the way, from the shrapnel flying everywhere, was to crawl under one of those cars. And the car that I had to crawl under was the car that my train had already started moving out. And I grabbed a hold of the brake rigging underneath the car, the big brake rods, and held on to that and kind of walked with the car. And then that's when that door came down and it slipped right underneath the car. And of course, I was in the clear, and the back trucks of that car ran over that door and it derailed it, and it just started to roll the rail right out as it gone. Well, I thought, well, too bad now. It's just going to have to roll it out. So finally, I got a hold of that engineer, and I told him, I said, you can stop now, and we'll cut off this derail car and pull the rest out, which we did. But when I got back down to the engine, he said, how's everything up there? And I guess he could see I was a little bit shook up, and I was still shaking from what took place down there. And I felt that I was real lucky, you know. I was real blessed because I can tell you that after that shrapnel come flying out of the air, and the pieces of shrapnel that Walt had showed you, there was something much bigger than that. And if they'd hit a man, they'd killed him, you know. We were very lucky, all of us around there. None of us got hurt in that. And so after we got all the cars pulled back and the fire boys over there, they put the fires out and everything, that's when we went in and started cleaning up all the bombs and all the debris and, you know, and all that metal. They had bulldozers shoving it, trying to shove it out of the way of the road bed so that we could go in there and build tracks. And that's when my brother and I came in. He took the night shift and I took, well, he took midnight to day and I took from day to midnight. That's how we worked it. And the president, I was looking at that and so was he, and I kind of mentioned to him, I said, how long do you think it's going to take us to clean this mess up? He said, probably about a month and a half. So I was looking at that thing and oh my gosh. Pretty soon the president came in and he got us all in a huddle again. And he made a remark right in front of us, all of us, to the news people. They asked him, how long is it going to be before we can get the trains running here again? He said, we'll be up and running in 7 days. And I never forgot that as long as I lived. I thought, I about fainted. I thought, what? This guy's smoking here. I mean, you know, wow, 7 days. Little did I know that we was going to go 24/7s. We, you know, and that's when we started our 12 hours and with our crews, and we started putting the things together. We started putting in those tracks. We had all these people, like I said, about 350 people over there. And we started laying the tracks, and we had the graders in there and everything. We had trucks coming in there with a lot of dirt material to fill in the holes that had been blown in the ground and leveling out the road bed where we was going to lay our tracks back and all of that. And we went in there and started laying tracks. We had 2 big locomotive cranes we bought in from, they were cranes that was used in the B&B gangs building bridges, and we used those cranes to set in panels. Now, we got the panels from all over the country. We had panels, most of it 112-pound rail, 110-pound, you know, and a lot of that rail came out of Los Angeles, it came out of Texas, it came out of Oakland, it came out of Eugene, Oregon, it came out of Ogden, Utah, plus whatever we had around the whole division. And in our store department, we just about drained the store department of all the materials they had, you know, to put these tracks back, because we had like about 15 tracks gone. And on one area there, what we call the leads, we had 5 switches that was gone at one time. It just blew them out. There was nothing there. So each one of those switches would lead into the lead tracks, you know. So we had to put those all back, and they wanted them back, you know, as soon as they'd get them back. So I'll never forget, I had some top-notch roadmasters with me. We had a guy out of Winnemucca. We even bought that roadmaster all the way from Winnemucca. His name is Ernie Royball. We had another guy, his brother was Joe Royball, who was a roadmaster out of Sacramento. We had another one of my brothers who was roadmaster at Colfax. He relieved me there. We had one from Truckee, another one. So I had a lot of good experienced people, you know. I mean, they came in, and so we got in huddle and decided how we was going to put this thing back together. So we wanted to I told them we were going to lay a couple switches that night. Well, we had enough men there that we had enough people to scatter the switch ties out ahead of us down on the leads. We had the engineers guys come in and stake those switches wherever we was going to lay them. And we got in there and started figuring out what was going to do. So I delegated each roadmaster to do one switch. And that night, to my big surprise, when the daybreak broke, 5 switches had been laid. And I could not believe what those boys did. They really went to work, and I mean, they put that baby back together. So the next crew that came in at 12 o'clock, they then had to tie the leads up to those switches. So over the period of say, Monday all the way up to, I think it was Saturday night, we had laid all that track back in, and getting ready. We ballasted it, put ballast on it, and then they bought in 2 great big tampers for us. These self-jack tampers, liners and all that equipped. It's really funny. We had both those, took those tampers, one on each track, and we was going down. Now these tampers are all laser lined and jacks and everything on them. And all of a sudden we got down there a couple 100 feet, and these guys were side by side, and they're tamping. Each had a track, and they were tamping it. One of those tampers just grabbed that track and just raised it right up in the air. What in the world happened to that thing? So we got the mechanics over there and trying to figure out why that tamper did what it did. Nobody could figure it out. So finally one of them, he got to watching it real quick. They started him out again, and he got to watching. He said, "Hold it." He said, "I just discovered the problem." I said, "Well, what's that?" He said, "This tamper's picking up the beams off that tamper over there." So that solved that problem. So then we separated them about 3 tracks apart, so they wouldn't do that anymore, and tamped all those tracks up. But we did get that track back in time so that they could start switching after 7 days. We owned up to what the president said would happen, and those people did it. And I'll tell you, I was most grateful to those roadmasters that was out there I was working with. Boy. So with that, I'll take any questions anybody has. Mr. Shaw.
Can you tell us about your crew that got hauled off by the police?
Oh, yeah, I didn't tell you about that. During the cleanup, I had about 15 men out there that was on the Roseville gang. And we were out there cleaning up all the fragments from the bombs and the pieces, and that nitrate explosive, some of it didn't blow, it just come out in pieces and was all over the yard, So what we did is we went out and started to pick up all this stuff and pile it up. Well, we knew it wasn't going to get hit by bulldozers or anything like that, because we didn't want to take the chance of it might explode. So anyhow, we was out there doing it, and the sheriff's department from Sacramento came up there. And the next thing I know, they're just really raising Cain with my people, and which didn't sit with me too well. As I can tell you, those people were like my brothers, and I didn't like what the sheriff was doing. And I said, "Well, what are you doing here? Why are you after these guys?" He says, "They're picking up souvenirs for themselves." And I said, "No, just a minute." I said, "I don't think there's a souvenir in this yard we want." The only thing we're doing is piling up this nitrate stuff and putting it over in piles where it can be picked up and disposed of by the proper people. And I said, "That's what we're trying to do." Well, he said, "Don't look like it to me." And they bought a bus in, one of those that they haul off prisoners. They loaded all those guys in that bus. By this time, I'm boiling. Well, I had a big arm load, about like that, and I was taking it over to put in the pile, and this one guy comes running over to me, one of these sheriff's guys. He comes running and he says, "Where are you going with that?" And I said, "I'm going to put it over in that pile." He said, "You're not to pick up any more of that." I said, "Who are you?" I knew who he was, And he said, "Well, I'm the deputy sheriff here." And I said, "Well, you're on private property, and the best thing you do is get off our property. We're out here trying to clean this mess up." I said, you took all my people, you got them in a bus, you took them to jail." I said, it's not gonna fly, I can tell you that right now." So I just, he wanted to handcuff me and put me in a car and take me in too, and I said, "Forget it." I walked away from him. Luckily, he didn't put the handcuffs on me and do it. I just took the chance. I walked away from him, and I went down to the office and told our people what had happened, our big boys. Well, they called out all the big lawyers in, and they sent them to Sacramento. Well, that morning, here come my people all back in that bus. I'm standing there, I'm waiting for them the next morning. They get off of that bus, and I'm feeling pretty bad, what happened. That here these guys are trying to do their job, and we got a bunch of clowns out there taking them to jail. So anyhow, as they got off of the bus, I says to them, "Well, I'm sorry for what happened to you guys. I don't know what to say, but the only thing I am going to tell you, I know you had a rough night, probably didn't get no sleep, no nothing. So If you want to go eat, go over to the restaurant and order anything you want. I don't care what it is. Just get your breakfast and then come on back, and if you guys, any of you, decide that you want to go home and rest up or whatever, that's fine with me. I'll lose you guys for a day, but that's all right. They all got off that bus, you know, and not a one of them. They said, all we want to do is go eat. We're hungry. I said, go for it. So they come back in about, I'd say hour and a half, hour 45 minutes. And, you know, when they all got back in the huddle, I said, guys, any of you want to leave to go home, get some rest? And not a one of them, not one of those people left. They said, we come here to go to work. And they continued the shift in that day, yes.
Tell us about the bombs that were buried or later found.
Okay. Now, we picked up out there with all the people we had loading those bombs and loaders and everything else we had. Those holes that you've probably seen on the video show here, there was bombs even down in those holes, and we were going down in those holes, people, and dragging out every bomb we could find. Some of them, those big 250 pounds, we'd tie a rope onto them, and 4 or 5 guys, you know, just pull them out. And we got every bomb that we knew was there. And not only that, we had the ordnance people there with us, the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force. They were with us all that time. So every bomb we ever seen, and not only that, when those dozers were shoving some of that, those parts of those cars and wheels and all that stuff out of the way, they were watching to see if there was any bombs roll out from underneath that stuff, you know. So we were pretty certain that we got just everything that was there. And the only thing that I can tell you that I think happened was some of those bombs were buried down in those holes, you know, from the loose gravel. They just drove them down into those holes. And when the UP come along, you know, they went in and tore up the old Roseville yard and went in and regraded it all and whatnot. And I'm going to tell you right now, there may be some UP guys in here, but I really don't give a rat. I believe what happened is those bombs got buried in those holes, and they dug them up. And then, of course, it was gone. Everything was going around. They were saying that SP just pushed them in the hole and buried them. And I can tell you for a fact that did not happen. We did not purposely push any bombs in any. We wanted every one of those things out of there, you know, because we didn't want later on to go down and get blowed up either. So yeah, we cleaned that yard up as everything we could find. And not only did we go over it once, we went over it a couple times looking for all that stuff. And like I say, we had the ordnance people with us. So whatever got buried out there, it had to be some of those bombs. When they exploded, they just drove them down into the ground, you know. And then when they went out there and cut that hump down out there, they, you know, cut down in the grade and made a new grade. Then they dug them up at that time.
According to the FRA report, it was 1,400 bombs that were recovered by you on that day.
What was that?
About 1,400 bombs were recovered and sent back to Hawthorne.
Everything that we could find.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything that we knew was around. And like I said, when we were even cleaning the yards up from all that debris, all the wheels and the metals and cars that they cut up and everything, they had people out there watching. So if they did roll one out, we could take care of it. And they did roll a few of them out. And later we put them in a truck and they were shipped back to Lahontan, out there, base out there.
Of the 21 freight cars that were loaded with explosives, how many did not go out?
3.
Just the 3.
Just the three that went back to Hawthorne. Yeah.
All the others were scrapped.
They were all scrapped and they just blew them all up. I actually, you know, I never thought I'd ever see anything what I did that day. I never went to war. I tried to get in the service, and they said, you're just not qualified. So they kicked me out. But I'll tell you what, if that's what was in war, it was really an eye-opener. And I'll tell you, all that metal twisted, I actually seen wheels that was completely blowing off of these axles. Now those axles, we got a carman here. Is any carman in here? Anyhow, those axles were about that big around, and they're quite heavy. and I actually seen the wheels blowing completely off of those axles, and I seen an axle about 200 feet from where the bombs went off, stuck in the side of a boxcar, in a lumber car.
Yes, I understand that the bombs went from point A to B by truck, or the shells or whatever, to be loaded. And then they came from B down here to C by train. And they were, why were they done by train and not by truck again?
They had the contract. Probably the amount of bombs that were being carried.
They probably didn't want those on the highway either. It was pretty restriction about sending those bombs down the highways, so they hauled them by train.
I can say one more thing. There was a consequence of that they would not yard any of those kind of cars into the yard anymore. It was always a mainline change, and they would keep going. So there was some thinking afterwards that they couldn't do what they did, and so from then on, everything would just go mainline without stopping if they could. Just to keep it.
I think they did, Walt, what they did, they had what they call a unit train.
Yeah.
And those bombs would come out of Hawthorne down there. They'd bring them into Sparks, and then they'd put them on a unit train because we were on the main line.
Right.
As long as they came over the branch line,
It would just be a mainline change with the crew.
That's right. They just change off the crews, and they wouldn't even stop them in Roseville. They'd just change a crew and take it on to down to Port Chicago or wherever it was going. Yeah, they did have that concession they had to do. But
Thank you very much. All of us can join in greeting volumes of troops. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
thank you. You bet.
Oh, thanks.
You bet.
Thanks. That worked out good, huh?
Nice to meet you. Yeah, same here.